take your child out in the woods or outside, they get a taste of how small they are. When a kid's sitting in his living room, he feels really big. The fridge is right over there. His TV's here. Mom's gonna
Yeah.
run and do whatever I need. He's the
Good
he's
point.
he's on a throne. He's the king. But you put a
Right.
child out in the woods, all of a sudden he becomes real small, and he
Sure.
sees how big this world is. And it's a little
Right.
like, oh wow, I'm this little small thing in this really
That
big
keeps
world.
you in check, right?
And it
Kind of
puts
humbles you
it
really
gives you
quick, right?
perspective, it gives you
Yeah.
perspective on life. And that's huge. We all need that in our life.
Welcome to Raising Excellence, everybody. Today on the show, I'm super excited to have Emmy Award-winning producer, storyteller, and Florida adventurer, Chad Crawford. So Chad has built an incredible career around exploration, creativity, and helping people discover really what's possible. What I'm really, really excited about is how this conversation is going to help parents learn from his journey. Because in a world where so many kids are glued to screens and disconnected from real experiences and struggling to find confidence, Chad's work reminds us of something really powerful. Curiosity, adventure, and discovery may be some of the most important ingredients in healthy childhood development. So today we're talking about how parents can build confidence, find passion, take healthy risks, and grow into capable young adults. So Chad, welcome to the show, my friend. I'm super excited you're here. This is going to be great. And thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Yeah, appreciate it, man. Yeah, we go a long way back, don't we?
Yeah, long way. Yeah. I mean, I know that your kids trained with me in martial arts for a while, and our kids played Pop Warner together, right? And so yeah, many years.
It's been a cool journey to watch you kind of build your community and transition into a bigger business, bigger building. And now you've got your own podcast. I feel like I'm talking to like Lake Mary's version of Joe Rogan, like you've got to get that Joe Rogan vibe going on. And I appreciate you doing this podcast because I know your heart. I know you love kids, and I know that's for you. That's what it's all about.
Right. And so, I think it's incredible. I think we're kindred spirits in the way that where our passion lies. I know, and that's where I want to really talk about. I know you're also very passionate about kids, but I mean, everything I've known about you from the beginning, I mean, you are the Florida guy, right? Like, all about, you're the go-to guy. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah, yeah.
I know when I wanted to go camping that very
You're
first
not going to tell
time, I
this
was,
story, are you? Are you seriously going to tell this story?
I'm not going to start out with the story now, but we'll definitely get into that because, look, I know who to call.
Yeah,
And what I've learned a long time ago is, you just have to know a guy. And I
there you
said,
go.
I know the
There you
guy,
go.
I got a call to get it done. And, man, that was,
Well,
anyway.
hey, and I know a guy too. I wanted to get in shape. I called you last month. I said, "Hey, I want to get in shape," and you're my
Yeah,
guy. You're helping me get in
that's
shape.
it. That's it. That's why we have this connection. That's why we have this connection. Yeah, definitely. So anyway, I know that, and I just want to kind of give people a reference from where you're coming from and some of your
Yeah.
experience. So can you talk about that when you were a kid? Like what got you into, the outdoors, nature? Was it something that just like it was in you, or was it something it developed over time?
A lot of that is it's not a desire that I had. It was just what it was. My mom didn't want us in the house. That was it. We were
Right.
messy, nasty, stinking kids, and she didn't
Or
want us in
daddy.
the house. And so if you're not in the house, you're outside. You know,
Now talk about now how many siblings did you have?
So four siblings. So me and my sister were 2 years apart. Then my brothers were 10 years apart. So I had me and my sister were pretty close, and then they had my brothers 10 years separated from me. So it was, with a little distance there between me and my brothers. But growing up, like that's just what you did. Yeah, I wasn't so much interested in nature and butterflies and beetles, and you were just outside and you
Right.
really had no option. There wasn't an option to come inside and get water and get, like my mom would direct us to the hose. You got hose water,
Yeah.
and we just stayed outside. And through that being outside, just through sheer osmosis, we ran into adventure. We created adventure. Adventure just kind of spontaneously combusted You take a
Right.
couple boys and you give them an empty lot and watch out. Something amazing is going to happen.
You know what's interesting? I remember doing all those things too, but like at some point, Chad
Yeah,
really went deep into this, and Mike
you're right.
didn't. I went in a different
Yeah.
direction. So I'm
It-
really curious about like, why do you think like in the beginning, like what actually shaped your identity, or when did it turn?
right. I call it this family culture of outdoors, and it's something that's built over generations and generations. It doesn't just happen. My grandfather was a very incredible outdoorsman. This is a man who made everything with his hands. He made his own fishing rods, he made his own fishing plugs, duck decoys, he built his own house, built his own boat. So
Wow.
that was back when,
Okay.
men made things with their hands, and I was in awe of that as a kid. He was an incredible outdoorsman. He fished, he hunted, and I remember sitting at his feet just in awe at his first of all, his hands were so gnarled up, nasty fingernails and just cuts all over his hands. I'd never
Yeah.
seen hands like that, right? I mean, it was just incredible. And listening to him tell stories about being in the outdoors, I was just captivated. And I think from a young age, I wanted that kind of adventure and that kind of adrenaline. And for me, like where I found it was outdoors.
Yeah. 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 Now, was that passed on to your dad? Because you mentioned your grandfather.
Absolutely. So then on to my dad. I grew up
Yeah.
fishing with my dad, and that was back in the day when, it wasn't like, dad gave you 4 or 5 choices of what we want to do on a Saturday. No, we're going fishing and you're going to sit in the back of the boat and you're going to shut up and you're going to fish. And that's it. There's no 3 or 4 choices for lunch, for are you tired? Do you want to go home? No, we're fishing all day
Yeah.
long. So you better learn to fish it really fast or you got a long day ahead of you. I mean, that's just what it was. And today we give kids so many choices, too many choices. What do you want to do? You want to go to this? You want to that? Like, what do you want to eat? You want to eat this and that. And so our kids become accustomed to like, oh, everything comes with 5 or 6 choices. And that's not how we grew up. There was no choice. It was just this is what we're doing, and you happen to be along the ride, along for the ride.
Right. 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 And that's interesting you say that because I do a lot of work in the school. We do a lot of work in identity and getting kids locked in into who they are, what they can become as a leader, and all these different aspects, right? But it's interesting because a lot of times being locked in means like you have to go all in on a thing, on something, right? One thing. And so that probably has a lot to do with it, right? If there's too much, like as humans, don't you feel like if there's too many choices, it's confusion, and what do? We do nothing.
Analysis paralysis. I don't want to get
Yeah.
too deep in this right now, but yeah, our kids have way too many choices. I mean, just from parents alone, but now online and social media, they're a little inundated, and you tend to be a little mile wide, inch deep when you have that many things thrown at you because you don't quite know which way to go.
Would you say that like when you were out there, like you were made, hey, listen, kid, you're going fishing, whether you like it or not, like there's really nothing to do except be locked in on that one thing, right? Like you can't escape. You're on a boat. Well, you can't.
And over time, I learned to love it, right? I learned to love being out there. I learned to love that time with my dad. I learned a lot about being a man by watching him, how he interacted with nature, how he interacted with other anglers, how he conducted himself, how he took care of his gear. Like, I learned a lot just by watching my father do what he loved. And, I really cherished that time with him, and again, you have to understand back in the day, like my dad was fishing 2 or 3 times a day, not because he loved it. Well, he did love it, but he was also putting food on the table. He would bring fish home. That was part of the protein of our family. So there
Yeah.
was fun, but it was also a real practical rationale for why we're going fishing. And so I kind of grew up with that. I love to fish, but I love to bring fish home because I love to eat fish. I love to create kind of circle of catch, clean, cook, eat, and to sit around and talk about the catch. I think there's a lot of connectivity with nature that completing that circle, Me personally, I believe that God put these animals on earth for us to eat and enjoy, and kind of completing that is a real kind of a special thing.
Yeah. 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 I remember also the first time I went scalloping, I tagged along with you
Mhm.
guys.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have, it's so true. Like there's so many amazing memories because that was the first time Carson ever drove a boat
Oh,
was,
yeah.
and I remember we were right. You guys were here, we were there, and it was just, it was awesome when it was the first time we
A
went
trip like
scalloping.
that, a young boy, young girl can check a whole lot of boxes, the
Yeah.
things they've never done before. And for kids too, at that young age, you're building confidence in them in every little thing like that. Driving a boat, catching a scallop, catching a fish, getting up early, getting out in the water. All those things build those little layers of confidence that, eventually you're actually standing on something that you can actually do something significant because you have those layers built up over time.
Yeah. 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 Now I kind of want to get I want to go to a different angle on this because it's interesting what you said about like we gave 'em one choice. We were thrown on the boat and that's it. And you learn to do that. And I agree. I think it's very simplistic. It's like that's it. And you learn to love it. But there's a lot of people out there, they're gonna say, no, no, no. Like, what happens if he doesn't love it? I don't want to force him or her, and we have to give them choices, and I mean, so like, is there a line, or do you think that when they're doing it long enough, they just learn to assimilate?
I mean, that line is age, so look, a kid gets to be older, 16, 17, 18, it makes it tougher, but when you're dealing with a young kid, no, you're part of the family. This is what the family is doing. And, unless they have some extreme diagnosed phobia to the outdoors or to salt water or something, unless there's some medical reason why you can't be out there, you're coming out there. Because a lot of times kids kind of just they don't know what they don't know. That's it. They don't know what they don't know. And until they get out there and experience it, they have no reference. So there's no reason why a child shouldn't want to do something for the first time. And I think it's just the momentum. I always talk about that, like, you create momentum, and if you have good momentum that we're doing something, a kid just kind of gets washed up into that. If you're kind of wishy-washy about, I'm not sure if this is what we're doing, and they
Right.
sense that in you and they'll pounce on it. But if you're like, this is what we're doing, we're going here, and you're coming along, here we go. They just get kind of caught up in that. Next thing you know, they're doing it.
So that's a great point because that's something we always talk about too. We talk about energy and being locked in. At the school, we talk about being decisive, right? We
Yeah,
we say that leaders go first. Leaders are decisive, and when you have that energy and you have that assertiveness and that conviction about like what you're going to do, right? Like, hey, we're going fishing. All right, guys, let's do it. Then like it's harder for them to be like, uh, let's go. And you're like, okay, and they go. And then to your point I think it's great how you're getting them in the environment to be a little uncomfortable, but you're there. Like you're not throwing them in the water. You're there when they're struggling with that fish or whatever it is. You're helping them, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's a
You know,
feather in their cap when they do it.
and look, I mean, this is something that I struggle with. Anybody struggles with. I mean, I have 4 kids, and sometimes getting them to do things in the outdoors is a struggle. It's just the way it is. And but you, as a parent, you kind of have to. I think there was a time when I would really get my feelings hurt when they didn't want to go do something with me outdoors, or I would take that very personally. And I think especially as a
Yeah.
dad, you have these certain expectations of your kids. And of course, we tend to romanticize our childhood and we bring all that to the table. And you really kind of have to be, okay with a no when they get older, and know that, maybe there'll be a season when that'll come back around. They'll want to do things with me. My kids are a little older now and they do want to do things with me. But, as a dad, it's easy to get your feelings hurt when, you want to have those experiences so bad with your kids and they just don't
Right.
want to do it, and
Right.
you got to be ready for that and be okay with that, and not make them feel guilty and not kind of, because that just makes it worse.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because and I've been in that situation myself, and
Every dad has.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And so what do you do? And you have to kind of like, well, and it's interesting because I think we have as dads been in that situation, and you have to kind of know that, well, I could be jeopardizing the relationship with my kid if I push too hard,
Yeah,
right? And I don't
yeah,
want to do that. So you're kind of like threading that needle, and a lot of parents ask that about activities. And that's any activity, whether it's martial arts, baseball, whatever it is. They're like, well, at what point do we not push? At what point do we kind of ease off and let them make their own decision? What do you think about that? Whether it's outdoor activities or whatever it is.
I mean, again, I think it's age too. I think, when I'm talking about, kind of getting my feelings hurt because kids don't want to, my kids maybe turn me down. It's when my kids are a little older. They're a little older. They've got other things going on in their life. But when a child is young, when I say young,
Yeah.
12 years and younger, the kid should really be doing whatever you want them to be doing. Whatever that is, going with the family. When it comes to sports and stuff, I don't know, Mike, that's probably a little outside of my realm because I that's not something we pushed on our kids a lot. It's not something I
Yeah.
did a lot. And it kind of happened organically within our family. If our kid wanted to do karate or do soccer, we just let them do it. We never pushed that on them. Although I think that's great that kids are active and like that. I think we should, as parents, should definitely encourage that for our kids to stay active.
Yeah.
Sorry, to stay active in that way.
But I think it's for you, it was different because you like this is what your family did.
Right.
They got brought up into that, right?
Yeah, and
You said,
every family's different, right? And it comes from the parents. So you get parents who are musicians, well, the kids are probably gonna be playing a musical instrument, Kids dads in karate, well, kids probably gonna be doing karate at some points. All that stuff is just osmosis, right? We're born in this family unit, and we kinda pick up what's around us, and whatever's around us is what, kinda rubs off on us, and off we go. But I think, whatever it is, whether you're outside doing something in nature, hiking, or you're swinging a bat, it's really still about building those levels of confidence, giving kids independence, helping them find themselves within those activities, and really kinda helping them gauge their digital life, because if kids are doing sports, they're not on their phones, they're interacting with
right,
friends, bumping into each other, which is good. They're having confrontations, they're having to
right.
deal with confrontation, different personalities. So all that is just so much better than,
Yeah. And that's what I want to ask you about too, because and wow, like like we could take this all the way up into like the economy, right? Like, I mean, I think we've become more of a consumer type of economy, right? Like we don't create as much things anymore. So it's all the way down. It starts with us. It starts with the kids. It goes to the kids. And so kids nowadays, they are consuming, right? But they're not creating. So like
yeah, we talked about this
obviously there's
earlier.
yeah,
Yeah.
that can be problematic. How do we change the direction of that?
One of the things I would do, I would come in the house from work or whatever, and one of the first things I would say to my kids is besides hi and, how's your day, yada yada. I would ask, you know, what did you consume today and what did you create? And because I really wanted my kids to understand the difference because so much of their life is consuming things. When they're
Right,
doing this, they're consuming something else somebody has created. Somebody else made something and they're consuming that creation. They're liking it, they're commenting on it.
right,
Are you creating? What are you creating? And that could be a memory, it could be something you make, it could be a painting, it could even be something on digital, but you're making something for this world, not just consuming what other people have made. And I wanted them to understand that you've got to keep that in balance because so many kids today, they consume so much more than they create. And
I think we all
when you have a kid who's like that and yet it grows up with that imbalance, it makes it very difficult to create because you think that there's so much already out there. Like, what could I create that's not already out there?
right.
I used to do a lot of speaking at Full Sail, and I would have kids come up to me afterwards. I would talk about this, and they would say, You're so right. I would, think of an idea for a cool video game, and then I would go around and search around. I realize, oh, it's already been done, or somebody else is already making it. So when you're in that space of trying to create, but you're also consuming, like that's a difficult place to be. If you want to create something, you have to isolate yourself from that consumption so you can truly create something unique and original. And when I used to make television, I would tell my staff, don't watch TV that's kinda like what we're making. I don't watch television that's similar to what we're making because I don't wanna be influenced by that. I wanna create something that's truly authentic and unique, and it's difficult to create something like that if you're constantly being bombarded with other people's work and consuming all this stuff. And so
Right.
that's one of the biggest challenges this next generation faces is being able to isolate themselves, go deep in thought, and create something truly unique and original without being influenced by so much other stuff that's around us, right?
Right, right. And when you look at it and you say, well, some people may say, well, why is it important, right? Like even kids may not see the value of that. Like history, they may say, I don't care about history. I don't care about that. But it's interesting because if you look at what you're talking about and you really start to unpack it, why being in that creative space is so important, it really allows you to be introspective, right? It allows you to go, like you said, allows you to go deep within yourself. And how do you grow? How do you be better? Well, I have to constantly push the envelope. I have to think of new ways that I can relate to somebody. I have to be resourceful. One of the biggest things we see nowadays with kids is a lack of resourcefulness. So as soon as they hit a wall, they start receding from their goals, right?
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
creativity and the ability to be introspective, that's what allows you to navigate around challenges in life, right? And it all comes from that creativity.
Back to, my mom pushing us outside and forcing us to be outside, she wasn't saying, hey, she wasn't setting us up for some cool game, or she didn't go down to Hobby Lobby and buy a bunch of crafts and, we weren't, scrapbooking. She just said, "Get outside." And then we would sit around, we would complain of how bored we are, "This sucks." The next thing you
Yeah,
know, we had created this amazing world, we're doing this, we got teams and battles and all this stuff going on. Out of that boredom, something great comes, right? That you really can't no parent can recreate that. It only created in that moment by the gift and mind of a child that we can't understand. And so but today it's very difficult for our kids to get to that boredom place. There's no boredom. My kids have never been bored.
right,
We're to the point where it creates something unique and something awesome, from that boredom. And
right,
so, we as parents feel this need to entertain and constantly have something going and you know, it's really weird because as parents now I notice that for a child to say, "I'm bored," it feels like a personal attack. It feels like I failed as a parent that this child is bored. Like, "Oh my gosh," like, how awful of a parent that I've allowed my child to get bored. And that's just
right,
the case. I mean, that we as parents, we really need to reject that and just know that, if your kid is bored, you're doing good thing. And just keep that kid bored. He won't be bored for long. She won't be bored for long. Next thing you know, they'll be running around and doing something.
right, right, right. It's funny when you say that because I've even said it in our summer camps. Because in our summer camps, let's say we have to be very, very structured. We may have 20, 30 kids on the floor. And so we always have to have something for them
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
restructured. And I was told by an educator years ago, either you have something for them or they're gonna have something for you, and you're not gonna
Yep.
like what they're gonna have, right?
Yep.
So yeah, like in maths, when you have a big group like that, we have to be. But I've also noticed if you take 5 minutes and you have a bunch of kids in a group and you don't give them any direction,
We'll
in
make
about
something,
five
baby.
minutes,
They'll make something.
they're gonna come up with this game. They're gonna say, "Yeah, you do this and and it could be like the weirdest game. It could be like could be throwing a ball, but they come up with all these new rules, and then it grows, and then so yeah, yeah. That's a I mean, it's interesting nowadays too because you would think that this would engage kids, right? Like you would think, but typically when kids are entertained like this, they're not even really fully engaged, right? Like you've seen kids they can be watching a TV show, doing something on their phone on TikTok, and their homework at the same time, you know? And they've said that, and they think that they're doing themselves a solid because they're multitasking, right? And it makes them actually they're so smart. But actually, it's been said that multitasking actually decreases intelligence, right? Because it robs you from the ability to be locked in and to go deep and to come up with these creative solutions, right? You're just everything's surface.
Well, look,
But I'm retained, but they're not engaged.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, the whole multitasking thing is really just kind of a lie, I mean, that
Yeah.
was what we were sold with these, that they were going to make us smarter, and this is going to be, it's going to make our life better. And in some ways it has, but in a lot of ways it
Yeah.
has. And but look, I'll say this too, that for the longest time, it was the wild, wild west when it comes with this. I mean, you talk about these in the midst of raising kids. Parents were given no resources. The government wasn't stepping in and showing us how to do this, different fixes, what's right, different ages. Nobody knew.
Right.
They just, Steve Jobs just made this thing, dropped it into our society and walked away. And it was left up to us as parents to figure this out. Well, we
Yeah.
got hooked on it. And so now our kids are hooked on it. But what's
Right.
going to happen, you're going to see here in the next 5 years, there's going to be a warning label on this thing on the back of it, just like there is a pack
Yeah.
of cigarettes. And
Yeah.
just like kids can't drive until they're 16, it will be a law. It's already a law in Florida, but it's not real enforceable. But there will be a law statewide saying your child is not allowed to be on this thing, social media, until they're 15 or 16. So now, as a parent, you have something you can back up against and say, hey, the government said, Tommy, you're not allowed to be on social media till you're 15.
Right.
And so now the parent can stand on something and push back. And so now we can give our kids their childhood back in the name
Yeah.
of, like, this is not good for you. We all know this. There's many studies out there, like, that's well documented. But now parents are going to have something to stand on. They're already taking them out of schools, which is having a huge impact on our kids' ability to learn and to be still and to absorb information. So that is the good thing. This thing was the wild, wild west. The pendulum swung really far, and now it's going to come back a little bit. And I'm really happy for our kids and for parents that are going to have a lot better tools moving forward to create balance in their home.
Right. Right. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. You see that. And you see, actually, there's some platforms right now that are requiring the kids to be a certain age if they use it. And so, yeah, that's definitely, I agree. I think that's coming. And I believe Facebook or Instagram, it just came out like 2 days ago.
Oh,
They
yeah,
lost a big lawsuit.
this
Did you
is
hear
it,
about
man.
that?
This is
I
it.
mean, to them, it's a drop in the bucket, but yeah, I mean,
This is
I
it.
think it's starting to come
The
around.
thing that happened to big tobacco is going to happen to big tech. And this is just
Yeah.
the beginning, Mike. You're going to see all kinds of lawsuits, and it's going to put them in check. It's going to put them on notice in a good way. The
Yeah.
party is
Yeah.
over for these guys. The party is over,
Yeah.
and it's time to pay the piper. It's time to come clean. And they're going to have these next 5 years going to be very difficult for all those guys.
Yeah. Well, I don't feel sorry for them. They're going to find another
No,
way to, because they're just going to create something
neither.
new. Look, they're
Yeah,
the creators. We're the
yeah.
consumers. So, and it's unbelievable. Like the scientists they have behind this stuff that understand the dopamine, reactions that we have, and they know exactly what to do to get us going. I mean, if you think about, back in the day, when everything started, there was comments, and all of a sudden everything's gotten condensed. Like the time frame's gotten condensed, right? Like now everything is, likes and hearts, and then even the videos, it used to be long form, now it's short form. It's quicker and quicker and quicker, and they understand what they're doing. And so, yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people do. So yeah, I think that's going to probably turn around, but I also think that th- there's just too much involved. And so we have to be ready. And the question is, as parents, how do we get our kids ready? Right? How do we get our kids ready for the next thing that's going to be trying to steal them? They're stealing them away. And so I think a lot of
Well,
that, what you talk about is,
and this thing will flip. It'll flip from where it is now, where a parent feels guilty or maybe feels guilty because they don't they don't have their kid doesn't have a phone, and that's going to flip to a parent feeling guilty because they did give their child a phone, at before 15 or whatever. So like it just needs to be known, and it will over time that, when you're 15, that's when you can get social media, and we need to build in ramps for our kids to prep them for that. But at least we give that child that time, that critical time as they're growing and developing. We're stealing that away from them right now, starting at
Right.
when a kid, 10, 12. We're stealing that critical time in a child's life when they should be outside, getting their feet dirty, running around. That's being stolen from them with these
Yeah.
phones because it's so captivating and so powerful that it just makes it really difficult.
Now, some parents are going to play just playing devil's advocate here. Some parents are going to say, well, that was back 30, 40 years ago. You could let your kids out and play, but nowadays someone's going to take them and this and that. So what do you say to that?
I mean, that's the product of a 24-hour news cycle. I mean, statistically, our kids are safer today than they were 30 years ago. It's just the truth. If you look at crime against children, our kids are safer today. We have so much safety in place, crossing walks and seat belts and safety this. I mean, we are safetied up. We got so much safety. You can't walk around. You could bump into safety. And, our kids are safer today than they've ever been. Do bad things happen? Absolutely. But is it enough to deny your child the ability to have independent moments and learn? And no, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. And I think, for a parent who that sounds absolutely terrifying to let their kid ride their bike down to the corner store to get a Coke or whatever, um, I would tell that parent to let your kid do it, but watch from a distance. Let that child
Yeah.
have what that child perceives as an independent moment, but as a parent, observe from a distance for your own peace of mind until you feel safe that that child can do that and knows what they're doing, because look, that's how kids learn. They learn to cross the street, and they have to have those experiences, and if we deny them of that, we
Yeah.
deny them, not even that, but like, cleaning up their room and doing chores and all the stuff that's about, growing up. It doesn't do that child any good. And so that's what I tell parents, like let that child have what it perceives as an independent moment, but supervise from a distance, you know, until you feel good about letting that child give a little longer leash, because what that child gets from crossing the street, going to the corner store, getting a soda, coming back is so big when it comes to
It's huge. It's
confidence.
huge. I
And
remember that's one of my best childhood memories. To your point, I remember me and my buddies would get on our bike and we'd ride out of the development and we'd cross in Jersey. There was this Route 9. It was like Lake Mary Boulevard. And we
yeah,
would cross over that and we'd go to this little corner store. We'd play video games, we'd get pizza. And it
big
was like,
time, man,
man, like
big
I
time.
have arrived, right? Like I'm a man. We're like cool. We're no parents are around, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you. So I want to talk a little bit about some of your expertise on outdoor stuff because I know that was who I reached out to when I want to take my son camping
yeah,
for the first time. I called you. I said, "Man, like, what do I need? How do I do this?" So, like, let's say you have a parent, they have a couple kids, 5 years old, 8 years old. They're looking for something to do next weekend, and they want to embrace. They want to go out and do things in nature, but like maybe they don't have a lot of money. They don't know what to do. So, like you said before, they do nothing because it's too many decisions, and we don't do anything. We stay in the house and watch video games. So,
yeah.
what can they do?
I mean, I always say start within your own zip code. Don't go way out. Don't go far. Don't go places you're not familiar with. Start in your own zip code, places that you're familiar with. You're close to where you live, so it's not a crazy drive. And just there are so many great places to take hikes, especially in Seminole County. Go find a great place to hike. Get out there early. Don't leave at 11:30 and get out there at noon. Get out there early, and you do that because it's cool, and that's when you're going to see wildlife. You do a trail hike at noon, you ain't gonna see nothing. But you
Okay.
go out there at 8:30, you're gonna see a deer, you're gonna see all kinds of birds, you're gonna hear all kinds of wildlife because that's when wildlife is active. So start small and build. Nothing happens overnight. You have to build this culture of this is what we do. You get comfortable with that. You might want to go camping or you might want to rent a boat, rent a pontoon boat and go out for the day and go on the intercoastal or, have kind of a cool moment. But here's what you have to remember is that, you know, you don't know what you're doing, and that's okay. Let your child know that you're learning this. We're going to learn this together. And that
Yeah.
brings that child in and allows that child to be a part of what you're learning. Especially for dads, we want to pretend like, oh, I know how to do this. I know how to camp. I got this, kids. Back up. I'll show you how to do this. But if you
Right.
don't know, you don't know. And you
Yeah.
need to be honest with your kid about that. Hey, let's do this
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't know where we should go hiking. Like, what do we need? Do we need a hiking stick? Let's get on the computer and find a place to hike. Bring them in on that. Give them some buy-in. Let them pick which one. Where should we go? You want to go? Go here? You want to go there?
Yeah.
Get them some buy-in on it and start small, and then you can expand further out, further out. Next thing you know, you're going to the Keys, going lobster, and you're going up to, the Panhandle to
Yeah.
do something cool up there. So don't bite off more than you can chew.
Right.
Start slow and build from there. But you got to be consistent with it. This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. And also know the worst experiences, as you know, Mike, are going to be the ones they will remember.
Oh man.
They're not going to remember the beautiful
My
day.
kid
They're going to
still
remember,
remembers the when we went camping. And look, and to your point, I think it's important. You have to be real with your kids. You can't tell them, "Hey, if your kid's 5 years old, right, you want to be like, oh man, I'm going to show you how to camp." But you
yeah,
tell them, "I've never camped before." And you know what? Here's a great thing. We did that, and as the story goes, I want to take my son out camping because I'd never been camping before. My dad never did these things with me, but I wanted to provide the experience. So I told him, I said, "Listen, buddy, I want to go camping. And it's cool because it's going to be my first time doing it too. So we get to experience it together. But we'll know what I'm doing. So I'm going to call a buddy of mine. He's the man. I'm going to get everything we need." And I did. And it was a disaster, not because you misinformed me or anything,
because you
but
didn't have
we
you
got
weren't
there
looking at the
late
weather.
and it rained and it was, but you know what? But that was so memorable because
Yeah.
we, it was like we faced this challenge together.
Yes.
Like in a moment, we said, "All right, it's raining. Get the headlights on. Let's get this campsite up quick, quick." And all of a sudden it was like, then we lay in there at night and it was a little wet in the camp. It was a little wet in the tent, but it's all good. But we were laughing about it
Yeah.
and we still remember that.
Well, an amazing thing happens when you take your child out in the woods or outside. They get a taste of how small they are. When a kid's sitting in his
Mhm.
living room, he feels really big. The fridge is right
Yeah.
over there. His TV is here. Mom's gonna
Yeah.
run and do whatever I need. He's the
Good
he's
point.
he's on a throne. He's the king. But you put a
Right.
child out in the woods, all of a sudden he becomes real small, and he
Sure.
sees how big this world is, and it's a little
Right.
like, oh wow, I'm this little small thing in this really
Kind of
big
keeps you
world.
in check, right?
And it
Kinda
puts
humbles you
it
really
gives you
quick, right?
perspective. It gives you
Yeah.
perspective on life, and that's huge. We all need that in
Yeah.
our life. That's why I go outdoors. That's why, when you're faced with a crazy storm like that, you realize how small you are, how big Mother Nature is, how strong it is, and how much you should respect it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And you know what I thought was really cool about your show? And now you have How to Do Florida, and you still have that, right?
I'm not doing that as much.
Okay.
I did 13 seasons, over 130 episodes, so that series has really kind of wound down.
But tell the people about the other project that you're involved with.
So I had my yard show, Flip My Florida Yard, which we're
Okay,
teaching
yeah.
people how to use Florida friendly landscaping principles. We can't continue to use as much water as we do on our lawns and fertilizer. And that shows you how to use less water, less fertilizer. But most recently, I did a series called Protect Our Paradise, which is a conservation
Mhm.
series. And I did that and I partnered with Conservation Florida to produce that. And since then, I've come on full time with Conservation Florida. So I'm super excited to be a part of this organization. They are a land trust org, which means they go out and look for environmentally sensitive land, and they look for ways to protect it, either with the
Mm,
landowner or buying it, putting it in perpetuity, putting a conservation easement on it so it can't turn into a Walmart or another Family Dollar.
mm.
And so I'm excited to join this group and continue to be able to protect Florida water and wildlife.
Very cool. So they actually work with lobbyists in Tallahassee too to make that
Not
stuff
so
happen,
much
or how?
lobbyists. I mean, they are involved in Tallahassee and they're involved in different policy decisions, but it's really more about working with landowners, trying to identify, because you'll have a landowner who's owned a ranch for 3 or 4 generations, and
Yeah, that's what happened here at Griffin Farms.
he's got developers knocking on his door wanting that
Yeah,
property. And maybe the kids don't want it, but maybe the original owner wants to keep it, wild land, doesn't want it to turn into a Winn-Dixie. Well, they
yeah,
would work with the city or they work with a group like us to try to find money to put it in conservation. Each deal is a little different. It's basically a real estate transaction that happens. But yeah, that made me sick to
very
my
cool.
stomach when they knocked down Griffin Park. That was an awful day. Awful day.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
bet.
I digress.
Wow. But I have to admit, I love that there's a gym there. So I don't care about the Winn Dixie, but last question I have to ask you, and I want to ask you about kids today. And we talked a lot about the challenges that they have and the challenges that parents have and things we need to do to get better. What would you say when you look at kids today? Like, what gives you hope?
I think what gives me hope is that, even looking at my kids and knowing that they know they can sense when enough is enough. And that gives me a lot of hope. So kids kids know when they've had too much screen time. Like they know they can sense the imbalance of it. They really can. And the older they get a little better at it. And so it's cool to see kids reject that, wanting to go back. More and more kids now want just a digital camera without their phone. And they're kind of going back to those kind of old school media formats. You see a lot of kids who are old souls now, listening to old music,
Yeah,
throwback music. There's this nostalgia that's kind of happening with this younger generation where they're looking back and kind of wanting some of those nostalgic things when things are a little slower, a little simpler, a little more focused.
yeah,
Kids sense this is kind of crazy and it's all over the place. I think they're
right,
looking for something that's more grounded, that's more simple, that feels more connected, that can physically touch it. And so
right.
I love that. I love that. And, as parents, you really kind of have to let your kid feel that a little bit. They have to feel that. And they have to kind of feel like, okay, this is enough. I look over at my daughter, she's like, okay, yeah, it's enough. And she knows she's been scrolling too much. It's time to get on. It's time to do something. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's interesting, because it's like, like kids at the end of the day, like adults, like they're looking for authenticity and they're looking for discipline. They're looking for that
yeah,
structure and they need that, right?
yeah. It's
And
turn
and
them
it's
on.
like
Yep.
even though I mean, how many Oreos can you eat? And like until you
You
just
can.
don't feel good anymore, right? And you're like, all right, I want to stay. I want to get out. I want to do something. I want to be active.
Yeah.
Which so for you,
Yeah.
you're hopeful that kids, even though they have these challenges with the screens and things like this, and it looks like sometimes we can be moving astray a little bit from who we are is like the best thing for us as people, that there's this intrinsic ability within us, within our youth and within adults too, right? To like recalibrate us.
And I think
I agree.
No, I think one of the
Yeah.
challenges that we face as humans, not even our kids, is the ability to focus on one thing for an extended period of time. For my business is a creative business. And I realize I made a conversation with my staff about, and I use this kind of peaks and valleys graph to show that like when you get down in that valley, that's where the good stuff happens. But that takes time and effort to get down in there, to stay focused. The longer you can stay in there, that's where some really good stuff happens. But as soon as you
Right.
respond to an email, your phone rings, something dings, you get popped back up to this top here we call the froth, where nothing really great happens. You're just playing whack-a-mole and you're just putting out fires. Like nothing great is happening here. Nothing's being
Right.
created and being birthed, you know? And so for our kids, even for us to be able to stay in that valley as long as we can,
Right.
isolating ourselves. I used to say, God threw Paul into the jail so he could write the New Testament. Like just total isolation, just being in a place where there's nothing else that can distract you. And I think in the future, you're going to see places like that where adults will literally check ourselves in for a couple days of just
Yeah.
complete isolation so we can focus on doing something amazing and then we can come out and try to execute on it, right?
I do it every year, man. What I'll do is like right around the new year, I'll take 2 or 3 days and I lock my, and I get a hotel and I lock myself in the room. Well, you could do it in your house, but it's different. When I'm in a hotel, everything's different. There's I don't have the comforts of home and luck. So you got to separate yourself from, I believe it, I call it basement time, and going into the basement and getting some good deep work done. That's where you're right. That's where the good stuff comes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, look, brother, I appreciate you coming on today and talking and sharing your passion and your insights to everybody. I think this is going to be great. A lot of people are going to get a lot out of this. And so, my friend, thank you for coming on. And if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about your work, or maybe some of your contacts, because that was one of the biggest things that I loved. I would follow you and I would say, man, like this is maybe the guy I want to go to Captain Tony when I go to Key Largo, and this is the guy I need, to help me, who's recommended by Chad. If anybody wants to get in touch with you on any level, like what's the best way to do it? Just like social
Just come and knock
media
on my
or
door. I'll give you my address and they can knock on my door.
all right, cool. All right, we'll be there tomorrow for a fish fry.
Well, yeah, I
Yeah.
got to go clean some fish right now. Actually, I went fishing yesterday. Um,
Nice.
the best way to get in touch with me is my email, chad@conservationfla.org, because I'm really looking for companies and brands and individuals who want to help me in this new chapter of protecting Florida, protecting land, protecting our wildlife, our resources. So I'm excited to kind of reach out and extend my sphere of influence and talk to more people about that and bring as many people into what this kind of new phase for me as possible. So, reach out to me on my Instagram is another good place too. You can put that in the link there. My Instagram is another good way to reach out and kind of message me through there. But I want to thank you, Mike. You've always been such a great inspiration for me. I remember I've had my company training with you for the longest time. My kids have seen you
Oh, we
and done
had fun.
karate
Yeah.
with you. I went to you recently to help me get back in shape, and you got me going in the right direction. So you've touched a lot of lives in this community with working with our kids. So I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah. My pleasure. Yeah. It means a lot to me. I appreciate you. I
All right, buddy.
appreciate you. So yeah, thank you, Chad. All right, everybody. So again, I'm Mike Friedman with Raising Excellence, and we're going to close this one out with Chad Crawford. And have a great day. And I hope this is great for everybody. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you, Chad.